coming in sharp gasps. "You already took them," he choked out, fighting against the invisible force pressing him down. His eyes darted around the room. He needed to break free. He needed to stop this. His gaze landed on the jars. The destinies. A sudden thought struck him like lightning. With a final burst of strength, Luke swung his arm toward the nearest shelf, knocking over a cluster of jars. Glass shattered. The glowing wisps inside them shot into the air like freed fireflies, spiraling wildly before vanishing, returning to their rightful owners. Sweet Whispers wasn't just a bakery. It was the beginning of her grand design, woven into the very fabric of her delectable creations. With each bite the villagers took, a thread of their destiny subtly unraveled, drawn towards the mysterious baker who promised nothing but sweetness.
Well, well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you need to subscribe.
In the heart of Esameha, a village where laughter mingled with the scent of blooming jasmine, Abena opened the doors to Sweet Whispers. The bakery, with its quaint, thatched roof and windows adorned with gingham curtains, looked like it had sprung from the pages of a fairy tale. As the first light of dawn painted the cobblestones gold, Abena arranged her pastries in the display window. Her hands, skilled and sure, placed each item with a flourish that suggested more than mere culinary talent. There was a grace to her movements, a dance of fingers weaving an invisible thread through the air. Kwame, the village blacksmith, was the first to wander into Sweet Whispers, drawn by the intoxicating smell of fresh bread and cinnamon. "Ah, Abena, the village has been buzzing with excitement ever since you arrived. What's the secret to making your bakery smell like heaven?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with a mix of curiosity and mild hunger. Abena smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, Kwame, if I told you I'd have to. Well, let's just say it's a family secret passed down through generations," she replied, her voice a melodic whisper that seemed to echo the sweetness of her treats. "Then I suppose I'll have to be content with tasting the magic rather than knowing it," Kwame chuckled, selecting a frosted cinnamon roll from the shelf. As more villagers gathered, Abena served each guest with a warm smile, exchanging pleasantries and watching as old men debated over chess in the corner. Young mothers swapped stories of their children's mischief, and teenagers eyed the cakes while pretending not to care too much. Little Nia, a curious 8-year-old, tugged at Abena's apron. "Miss Abena, why do your cakes taste so much better than my mama's?" she asked innocently, her eyes wide and earnest. Abena knelt down to meet Nia's gaze, her expression gentle. "Every baker adds a special ingredient to their recipes, my dear. Mine is a sprinkle of dreams and a dash of moonlight," she whispered, tapping Nia's nose playfully. Nia giggled, enchanted by the idea. "I wish I could bake with moonlight too." "You keep that wish close, Nia. Dreams have a way of taking root in the most magical ways," Abena said, standing up as she handed Nia a small cupcake topped with a sparkling sugar star. As the day wore on, the bakery filled with laughter and chatter, but beneath the convivial surface, Abena's eyes gleamed with an unspoken knowledge. Sweet Whispers wasn't just a bakery, it was the beginning of her grand design, woven into the very fabric of her delectable creations. With each bite the villagers took, a thread of their destiny subtly unraveled, drawn towards the mysterious baker who promised nothing but sweetness. Elodie stood by the riverbank, her eyes closed as she let the melody flow through her. The gentle burbling of the water provided a natural accompaniment to her song. Her voice, clear and melodious, carried over the water, drawing a small audience of villagers who paused in their daily tasks to listen. Her younger brother, Luke, approached quietly, carrying a basket of wildflowers he had picked for their mother. He always found peace in Elodie's rehearsals, seeing in them the promise of a future brighter than the simple life Esumeja offered. "That was beautiful, Elodie. Every day, your voice seems to capture more of the sky," Luke said, handing her the basket, his expression one of pride mixed with a tinge of worry. Elodie smiled, accepting the flowers. "Thank you, Luke. Sometimes I feel like my songs could actually take me somewhere beyond this village. Imagine that, singing on big stages where the world could hear me." Luke sat beside her, pulling a blade of grass and twirling it in his fingers. I don't just imagine it. I believe it will happen. But why wait for an opportunity to find you here? Why not create your own stage? His words sparked an idea in Elodie. You're right, Luke. There's the village festival next week. What if I make it my stage? What if I use it to show everyone what I can do? Excitement flickered across Luke's face. That's brilliant, but let's make it even more special. How about adding something unique to your performance? Like a light bulb clicking on, Elodie exclaimed, "A celebration cake from Sweet Whispers. I hear Abena's cakes are almost as talked about as her mysterious past. They say her treats bring luck." Luke's smile faltered slightly at the mention of Abena. "Just be careful, Elodie. People say a lot of things about Abena's cake. Not all stories are just stories." Elodie, buoyed by her plans, waved off his concern. "Oh, Luke, it's just a cake, not a spell. Besides, it's the music that will enchant them, not the food." Determined, Elodie stood, her gaze fixed on the distant hills. "Next week, I'll sing my heart out, and maybe someone will be in the crowd who can change my life." Luke nodded, his support unwavering yet tinged with an unease he couldn't quite shake. "Then let's prepare for your big day, and I'll be there, cheering the loudest." As they walked back to the village, Luke couldn't help but feel a shadow creep over his heart, a premonition that something was about to change, and not all changes come bearing good fortune. Elodie stepped into Sweet Whispers a few days before the festival, her heart filled with excitement and a touch of nerves. The bakery was quiet, with only the soft chime of the doorbell announcing her entry. Inside, the air was warm and sweet, filled with the scent of baking bread and vanilla. Abena emerged from the back, her apron dusted with flour, her smile as captivating as the aromas surrounding her. "Welcome, Elodie. I've heard much about your voice. They say it's as enchanting as the siren's call. What brings you to my humble bakery today?" Elodie, slightly starstruck, replied, "I want to make my performance at the festival in a few days truly memorable, and I've heard that your cakes are the best. I was hoping you could create something special for me." Abena's eyes twinkled, a spark of interest lighting up her face. "Special, you say? I think we can do something truly magical for you. What did you have in mind?" "I was thinking of a cake that could embody my hopes for the Futura cake, that could represent a new beginning, a launching pad for my dreams," Elodie explained, her voice filled with hope and ambition. "A cake for new beginnings, woven with hopes and dreams? A wonderful choice. Let's make it a chocolate and vanilla layer cake, with hints of cinnamon and nutmeg to spice up your journey," Abena suggested, her hands already sketching the design on a piece of parchment. As Abena gathered her ingredients, she began to ask Elodie about her dreams. "Tell me, Elodie, where do you see your voice taking you? What are the heights you aim to reach?" Elodie, caught up in the moment, shared her deepest aspirations to sing on grand stages, to touch people's hearts with her music, to escape the simplicity of village life for a world of dazzling lights and endless possibilities. Abena listened intently, nodding as she mixed the batter. "Dreams are powerful ingredients, Elodie. They can sweeten any mix, but they must be handled with care," she murmured, almost to herself. As she penned down Elodie's request, her lips moved silently, casting words not found in any ordinary recipe book. Abena with a serious look. "This cake will be a centerpiece of your performance. Treat it as you would your voice, with respect and a touch of awe." Elodie nodded, overwhelmed by Abena's intensity. "I will. Thank you, Abena. This will change everything." As Elodie left the bakery, the warmth of the oven and the sweetness in the air followed her out. She felt lifted, almost floating on air, unaware of the threads of her fate being woven into the very heart of her special cake. Abena watched Elodie leave with a knowing smile, her fingers lightly tracing the surface of the wooden counter. The young singer's energy lingered in the air, her hopes and dreams practically pulsing around the bakery like invisible ripples in water. Abena inhaled deeply, savoring the taste of raw ambition. "This one is special," she murmured to herself, stepping back into the heart of her kitchen. "A destiny so bright it will shine for generations." But Abena had no intention of letting that light shine for Elodie. This cake was more than a simple dessert. It was an altar, a vessel, a trap, and the festival, with all its unsuspecting revelers, provided a rare opportunity. The more people who ate from it, the more threads of fate she could weave into her own power. She moved with purpose, gathering ingredients with hands that had long mastered the art of deception. A pinch of cinnamon for allure, a splash of vanilla for charm, a swirl of dark cocoa to hide the bitterness of what was to come. As she cracked an egg into the batter, she whispered ancient words, her voice low and deliberate, threading incantations through the mixture like an invisible net. By the grains of time, by the hands of fate, let dreams be bound, let voices fade. With every taste, a thread I take, to twist, to weave, for power's sake. The batter thickened unnaturally, dark tendrils of energy pulsing through it before disappearing into the swirl of chocolate and cream. The kitchen lights flickered for the briefest moment, but Abena did not waver. She was beyond mortal fear. Her power had long since made her something else entirely. She placed the cake into the oven with care, pressing her palm against its side. The warmth pulsed beneath her skin, almost alive. Hunger is a powerful thing, she whispered, stroking the oven door. And they will hunger for more than just cake after tomorrow. As the cake baked, the scent spread beyond the walls of the bakery, curling into the streets like unseen fingers, reaching for the villagers, whispering to them in ways they could not perceive. The festival-goers would come with open hearts and eager hands, and they would eat. And with every bite, a part of them would belong to Abena. Hours later, as she pulled the cake from the oven, it gleamed under the dim lantern light, its surface perfect, its scent intoxicating. Abena traced the top with the tip of her finger, her smile widening. "This is more than a cake," she murmured, staring at the confection as if she were looking into the depths of a well. "This is a throne." She turned to the rows of jars lining the hidden shelves behind here, each one filled with the stolen essence of past victims, their futures bottled up and forgotten. Soon she would add more, and with Elodie's voice, with the ambitions of those who celebrated her tomorrow, Abena's power would grow beyond anything the village of Esumeha had ever known. Long before Sweet Whispers became the heart of Esumeja's village, Abena was not a simple baker. She was a witch, a collector of destinies. Born into an ancient lineage of witches, Abena learned early that power was not freely given but taken. Her grandmother, the infamous sorceress Nana Maroa, had taught her the art of binding fate, a forbidden magic whispered about in the dark corners of the world. But unlike her grandmother, Abena had no desire for power for herself. She had found a more profitable use for it. Destinies, she discovered, were a currency more valuable than gold, more potent than any spell. There were men wealthy, powerful, ambitious men who craved more than money. They wanted influence, genius, and unmatched skill, and Abena could provide it for a price. She became the unseen broker of fate, selling stolen talents, ambitions, and potential to the highest bidder. A young politician could suddenly command the hearts of a nation. A businessman could outsmart all his competitors overnight. A failing musician could become a global icon in a matter of weeks. They never asked where the gifts came from. They only cared that the magic worked. And so, Sweet Whispers was born not just as a bakery, but as a front for her true business. Abena was careful, selective. She never took from those who had nothing to offer. Instead, she sought out shining stars, those whose gifts burned brightly, whose futures held endless promise. She made them taste her cakes, laced with unseen incantations, and slowly drained them of what made them extraordinary. She bottled their destinies in delicate jars, and sent them away to her clients' powerful men who paid handsomely to own greatness without ever earning it. The villagers never noticed. Not at first. A girl who once sang with the voice of an angel suddenly found herself hoarse. A sculptor whose hands once worked like magic could no longer shape even the simplest clay. A brilliant young scholar found his mind clouded, his hunger for knowledge dulled. Their dreams faded, their fire dimmed. And far away, in glittering cities, strangers thrived, unaware that their success had been stolen. Abena never saw herself as a villain. To her, she was merely redistributing fate-taking from those who wasted their gifts and giving them to those who paid the right price. But then came Elodie, Elodie's voice was unlike anything she had encountered before, pure, untouched by fear or doubt, a destiny as bright as the morning sun. And when Abena looked at her, she didn't just see profit. She saw power. If she took Elodie's gift, sold it to the right man, she could cement herself as the greatest fate weaver in history. No longer a hidden witch, no longer a mere supplier, but the queen of stolen destinies. The festival was her perfect moment. And when Elodie ate her cake, Abena knew her greatest prize was now hers. She had won, or so she thought, because what Abena had not foreseen was Luke. And for the first time in her long life, the hunter was about to become the hunted. Outside, the moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow over the village, blissfully unaware that by the time the festival ended, many of its people would wake up as shadows of themselves, never knowing what they had lost. The festival of Esumeha was alive with color, music, and laughter. Lanterns flickered in the evening breeze, casting a golden glow over the lively crowd. The scent of roasted maize, fried plantains, and palm wine mixed in the air, blending with the rhythmic beats of the talking drums. Children ran between the dancers, their laughter ringing like chimes, while elders sat in clusters, sharing stories of the village's past. At the center of the festival grounds stood the grand table, and on it, the cake Abena's creation. It was a masterpiece, towering in layers of soft chocolate and vanilla, decorated with swirls of golden icing that shimmered unnaturally under the lantern light. The villagers marveled at it, each one eager for a taste. Elodie stood nearby, dressed in a flowing indigo gown, her braided hair adorned with tiny white shells. Her heart pounded with excitement. This was her moment. Her voice, her dream, was about to take flight. Luke approached her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You look nervous," he said, studying her face. Elodie exhaled and smiled. "A little, but it's a good kind of nervous. I want them to feel something tonight, to remember this moment." "They will," Luke said, but his voice held an unease he couldn't shake. His gaze flickered to the cake, and a strange feeling curled in his stomach. Something about it seemed unnatural. But before he could voice his thoughts, the festival announcer called out, "Now, Esumeha, prepare your hearts for the voice of our very own Elodie." The crowd erupted in cheers as Elodie stepped onto the wooden stage. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let her first note rise into the night air. It was magic. Her voice was rich, clear, and powerful, wrapping around the crowd like a warm embrace. Silence fell over the festival as everyone became enraptured by her melody. It was as though the stars above had paused to listen, their light twinkling in response to her song. Abena watched from the shadows, a knowing smile tugging at her lips. Slowly, she turned her attention to the villagers as they eagerly helped themselves to the cake. Slice after slice disappeared, each bite sealing their fates. Then it began. At first, Elodie didn't notice. Her voice carried, smooth and unwavering. But then, a flicker of strain. A single note wavered. Her throat felt suddenly tight. She pushed forward, adjusting her pitch, but something was off. The next note cracked slightly. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Luke sat up straighter, his brows knitting together. "What's happening?" Elodie swallowed, a bead of sweat trickling down her back. She tried again, but her voice felt distant, like it wasn't hers anymore. Her heart pounded harder. Something was wrong. The villagers, still caught in the spell of the cake, continued to eat, oblivious to the shift happening before them. Elodie's voice, once golden and commanding, now faded like a whisper lost in the wind. She clutched the microphone, panic settling deep in her bones. The power she had always known, the gift that had defined her, was slipping away, note by note. Luke shot to his feet, his breath quickening. No, this isn't right. By the time Elodie reached the last verse of her song, her voice was barely more than a strained murmur. The crowd, confused, exchanged glances. This wasn't the Elodie they knew. Where was the voice that could shake the soul? Where was the power? From the shadows, Abena exhaled softly, feeling the energy seep into her bones, into her very essence. The magic was working. Elodie's light now belonged to her. Elodie's knees buckled, and Luke caught her just in time. "Elodie!" he called, shaking her lightly. Her breaths were uneven, her eyes unfocused. I don't understand," she whispered, clutching at her throat. "It's gone, Luke. My voice is gone." Luke's jaw clenched. He turned his head sharply, searching the crowd until his eyes locked onto Abena. She stood at a distance, her hands folded in front of her, watching. She smiled. Luke felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. "This isn't right," he murmured, holding Elodie tighter. His gaze never left Abena. Something is very, very wrong. And in that moment, he knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. This was Abena's doing, and he was going to find out why. Luke had never been one to ignore his instincts. From the moment Elodie lost her voice at the festival, something gnawed at the back of his mind. It wasn't just bad luck or sudden illness, it was something deeper, something unnatural, and all roads led to Sweet Whispers. The bakery had long been a staple in Esumeha, and Abena had woven herself into the fabric of village life with her kindness and charm. But Luke couldn't ignore what he had seen the way Abena had watched Elodie falter with that small, knowing smile. Something was wrong. He started with hushed conversations, speaking to villagers who had visited the bakery before experiencing strange misfortunes. First was Didi, a young weaver who once dreamed of becoming the finest textile artist in the region. She used to create fabrics so beautiful that merchants from distant towns sought her work. Now, she struggled to make even the simplest patterns, her hands trembling as if something had drained her talent. It started a few months ago, Didi admitted hesitantly as they sat outside her hut one evening. "I remember eating one of Abena's cakes during a festival. It was the best thing I ever tasted. But after that, I felt different. It was as if my gift had just disappeared." Luke's stomach twisted. "And you never thought it could be the cake?" Didi shook her head. "Why would I? Who thinks food can steal something from you?" She rubbed her arms as if warding off a chill. "I thought maybe I was just losing my touch. But I swear after that day, weaving has never been the same for me." Luke thanked her and moved on. He found Kofi, a fisherman who had once been known for his uncanny ability to find the richest fishing spots. After celebrating his largest catch with a feast at Sweet Whispers, his luck had vanished. Then there was Amma, a teacher who had been preparing to leave the village to pursue a scholarship. After eating at Abena's bakery, her mind became clouded, her once sharp intellect dulled. She abandoned her plans, unable to understand why she had ever dreamed of leaving Esumeha in the first place. One case after another, Luke uncovered a pattern that made his blood run cold. "She's taking something from us," he muttered to himself one night as he sat outside, staring at the dark silhouette of Sweet Whispers against the moonlit sky. Not just Elodie, all of them. She's been doing this for years. But knowing wasn't enough. He needed proof. So, under the cover of darkness, he made his way toward the bakery. The village was silent, save for the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. Luke pressed himself against the side of the bakery, his heart hammering in his chest. The door was locked. Of course it was. Glancing around, he spotted a small, half-open window near the back. He hesitated only a moment before gripping the ledge and hauling himself up. With a quiet grunt, he slipped inside, landing lightly on his feet. The inside of the bakery was eerily still. The sweet, lingering scent of vanilla and nutmeg clung to the air, but in the absence of bustling customers and warm candlelight, the place felt wrong. Luke crept forward, carefully stepping over the wooden floorboards. The bakery looked normal enough, the counters lined with loaves of bread, shelves stacked with pastries. But Luke wasn't here for baked goods. He moved toward the back, where a thick curtain separated the shop from Abena's private workspace. With a deep breath, he pulled it aside. The room beyond was unlike anything he had expected. Jars dozens, maybe hundreds lined the walls, each glowing faintly with an eerie golden light. Luke's breath hitched. He stepped closer, his fingers trembling as he reached for one. His eyes widened as he read the name etched onto the glass. Elodie, his sister's name. The glow inside the jar pulsed weakly, flickering like a candle about to die. He picked it up, his pulse roaring in his ears. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. He turned to the other jars, reading their labels. Didi, Kofi, Amma. Every name belonged to someone whose dreams had inexplicably faded. The realization crashed over him like a wave. These weren't just jars. They were stolen destinies. A sound behind him made him freeze. Footsteps. Luke turned sharply, heart hammering. A shadow moved in the doorway. And then, looking for something, Abena's voice cut through the silence like a knife. Luke swallowed hard, gripping the jar in his hand as he met her gaze. Abena stood at the entrance to the room, her usual warm smile replaced by something else, something colder, something knowing. Luke had his proof. Now, he just had to get out alive. Luke's grip tightened around the jar as he locked eyes with Abena. The warm, motherly woman the village adored was gone. In her place stood something darker, someone who knew she had been caught. "Looking for something," she repeated, her voice silky, but the underlying threat was clear. She stepped forward, the candlelight casting long, eerie shadows across her face. Luke swallowed hard but didn't back down. "I know what you've been doing," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. He held up Elodie's jar. "You've been stealing from them. From my sister. From the entire village." Abena tilted her head slightly, as if amused. "Stealing?" she echoed, walking slowly along the row of jars, her fingers trailing over the delicate glass. "Is that what you think this is?" Luke clenched his jaw. "What else would you call it? Look at them, Abena." He gestured to the glowing shelves, fury rising in his chest. "These are people's lives, their futures." Abena sighed as if he was a child who simply didn't understand. "Luke, you don't see the bigger picture." She picked up one of the jars labeled Kofi and held it up to the flickering candlelight. "Do you know how many dreams in this village fade away, wasted? How many people bury their ambitions because of fear, because of doubt? They let their gifts rot, Luke. But I," she placed the jar back, turning to face him. "I preserve them. I give them purpose." Luke took a step closer, his breath heavy with anger. "You steal them. You take what isn't yours and lock it away." "Elodie." He shook the jar in his hand, voice breaking. "She was meant to be great, and you took that from her." For the first time, Abena's confident expression faltered. A flicker of something crossed her face, guilt, perhaps, or something deeper. "I never meant to hurt her," she murmured, almost too softly to hear. "Or any of them. I only take what they no longer deserve." Luke's stomach twisted. "You don't get to decide that." "I was once like Elodie," she admitted. "Bright, talented, full of promise. But dreams, they aren't enough, Luke. They slip away, no matter how tightly you hold on to them." Her voice grew quiet. "I made a choice to survive." Luke stared at her, conflicted. There was something deeply tragic in her words, but it didn't erase the damage she had done. "Survive at what cost?" he asked. "How many more lives will you take just so you don't disappear?" Abena's face hardened. "As many as it takes." Luke's grip on Elodie's jar tightened. His decision was already made. "Then I can't let you continue," he said. Abena's eyes darkened, her fingers twitching at her sides. "I can't let you stop me." For a moment, the room was eerily still. Then, Abena raised her hand. Luke barely had time to react before the air around him shifted. A sudden gust of wind knocked him backward, sending him crashing into the shelves. The jars rattled, some nearly tipping over. He gasped as an unseen force pressed against his chest, pinning him in place. Abena stepped forward, her expression calm, but her eyes burned with something fierce. "I didn't want to hurt you, Luke," she said softly. "Let you take them from me." Luke struggled, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "You already took them," he choked out, fighting against the invisible force pressing him down. His eyes darted around the room. He needed to break free. He needed to stop this. His gaze landed on the jars. The destinies. A sudden thought struck him like lightning. With a final burst of strength, Luke swung his arm toward the nearest shelf, knocking over a cluster of jars. Glass shattered. The glowing wisps inside them shot into the air like freed fireflies, spiraling wildly before returning to their rightful owners. Abena let out a strangled gasp, stumbling backward as if struck. "No!" she shrieked, reaching for the escaping fates. "You don't understand what you're doing!" But Luke didn't stop. With a desperate swing, he knocked another shelf over. More glass shattered, more destinies freed. And somewhere, far from the bakery, Elodie sat up in bed, a rush of warmth filling her chest. Her voice, her real voice, hummed deep inside her throat, as if waking from a deep sleep. Abena screamed, falling to her knees as her power cracked, splintering like the glass around her. Luke stood over her, breathing hard. "It's over," he said. Abena's body trembled. The bakery around them groaned, the very air shifting, as if the magic holding it together was unraveling. Luke took one last look at the remaining jars. There was only one way to end this completely. He raised his foot and stomped down, shattering them all. A deafening boom erupted through the bakery as the magic collapsed. Luke barely had time to shield his face as a powerful force exploded outward, sending a final surge of energy through Esamaja, restoring what had been lost. When the dust settled, Luke stood alone. The bakery was in ruins. The shelves lay broken, the jars shattered, the glow of stolen destinies gone. And Abena, she was nowhere to be seen. Luke exhaled shakily, stepping out of the wreckage and into the cool night air. The village was quiet, but he could already feel the change. And Sweet Whispers was no more. Abena sat in the ruins of Sweet Whispers, breathing heavily, her fingers curled into fists. The once pristine bakery, her sanctuary, her empire, was now nothing more than broken shelves and shattered glass. The Jarsha collection were gone, their stolen destinies returned to their rightful owners. She had underestimated Luke. She had underestimated his love for his sister. Rising to her feet, Abena wiped the sweat from her brow. Her hands trembled, but not with fear, with rage. She had spent years building this network, selling destinies to powerful men who would kill for them, and now she had nothing. A soft whisper drifted through the air, curling around her ears like a lover's breath. "Abena, you have failed us." The voice sent a chill through her spine. She turned sharply, her heart pounding. In the dim candlelight, a dark figure stood in the doorway, cloaked in shadows. A client, a buyer. Kwame the Python, Mensa, a feared businessman from the city, stepped forward, his towering frame barely fitting through the doorway. His suit was pressed, his shoes polished, but his eyes burned with fury. "You promised me something priceless," he said, voice dangerously low. A voice so powerful it could shake the world. "I paid you for that voice, Abena." Abena swallowed hard. She knew men like Kwame ruthless, unforgiving, a man who did not tolerate failure. "It was taken from me," she admitted, trying to keep her voice steady. "Elodie's brother, he discovered my collection and destroyed it. The magic unraveled before I could stop him." Kwame exhaled sharply, rubbing his chin, eyes cold and calculating. "That sounds like your problem, not mine. I paid you in full, Abena. I expect results." She stiffened. "I can fix this." "You'd better," Kwame said, stepping closer, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow over her. "Because if you don't, you won't have to worry about Luke." He leaned in, his voice like steel. "You'll have to worry about me." Abena bit the inside of her cheek, nodding slowly. "Give me time," she whispered. Kwame studied her, then smirked. "You have 1 week, Witch. Bring me another gift tone just as grand as the one you lost, or I'll take something from you." And with that, he turned and walked out, leaving Abena alone in the wreckage. Her breath shook. She pressed her hands against the wooden counter, trying to steady herself. 1 week. She had 1 week to steal another destiny grand enough to satisfy a man like Kwame. And only one name came to mind. Luke. He had been able to break her spell. He had seen through her magic. That meant he had a power of his own one he hadn't even tapped into yet. If she could take his fate, his ability to see the truth, she could turn this disaster into her greatest triumph. A slow smile spread across her lips. Luke had won the first battle, but the war? The war was far from over.